There has been so much Spider-Man news recently, I can't even keep up. So, if you don't know, the brand new Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Brand New Day, has been filming the last couple of days in Glasgow. And along with that, we've had a bunch of new information and news coming out via both official sources and also news reports about potential characters that are going to be involved in the film. So what I'm going to do is kind of just give you my overall thoughts on everything that is currently going on. Obviously this is developing, so there's probably going to be some stuff that I don't cover in this video that probably will come out after its release. So if that's the case, I apologise, but you know, it's ongoing filming. If there's other big stuff happening, I'll be sure to cover it. But first things first, if you're new to this channel, subscribe. This is pretty much a brand new channel. I've started doing it for, you know, non-Doctor Who stuff. I have a main Doctor Who channel. This is my place for non-Doctor Who stuff. Any bit of pop culture that I love goes here. So if you either know me from that channel or you don't know me at all, feel free to subscribe. That would be greatly appreciated. I'm going to be doing regular videos on stuff that I like, such as Spider-Man, DC stuff as well, Marvel stuff, anything like that. So if any of that's your bag, feel free to subscribe. But let's dive right in. So the first thing I want to talk about is the suit. So we've had two official videos of the suit so far, one of which was kind of it in shadow, the other of which was Tom Holland saying, "Are you ready?" before stepping out in the suit. And my lord, it's wonderful. Now it appears, there is some debate about this, but it appears to me to be the same suit as the suit at the end of No Way Home, which is, if you don't know, that in that movie, that suit is fully CGI. So this is the replication of it actually in live action. This is actually a physical suit that is going to be used for this movie, which I'm very relieved about. I think that they always look better than CGI suits. I just hope that they don't cover it in CGI, because this suit is beautiful as it is, and obviously as time has been going on, we've been seeing multiple high resolution images of this from filming, and they just look gorgeous. This might be one of my favourite live action Spider-Man suits already, if not my absolute favourite. It just looks like it's been ripped directly out of the comics. The only slight difference is the logoing, but I quite like both of the logos, so that's not really an issue for me. Everything else is just pure Spider-Man, right down to the massive web shooters, as opposed to previous Spider-Man suits, particularly MCU suits, where Tom has had more kind of wrist, sort of mobile web shooters. This kind of implies and suggests that this is following on from the events of No Way Home, where no one knows who he is and he's just a broke college student. So obviously he's not going to have the Stark technology that he had access to prior to the events of No Way Home, which again I really like. I did think that one of my issues with Spider-Man in the MCU, even though I do like those movies, I'm not an MCU Spider-Man hater or anything like that, but for me, I do think that he could occasionally become too reliant on the technology, so it's nice to see a more stripped back Spider-Man with just the absolute essentials of what he needs, you know, big web shooters, classic suit, nothing too fancy. Does look like, judging by the pictures, he is retaining a similar type of lens to what we've seen him in before, with the mechanical kind of moving lenses, which I saw some kind of debate over whether they should return. Personally, I think that they are just a cool innovation that should just stick around for any future Spider-Man interpretation that we get. It's a great way of translating the emotiveness of the comics into live action in a way that makes sense, and I just don't see why you would go back to not having them afterwards. Don't get me wrong, I love those older Toby and Andrew suits, but I just think that the lenses do add a level of expression that is worth keeping in future suits, and I don't know why you would get rid of that. I think it's important to acknowledge sometimes that just because something is more recent doesn't mean it's bad. More recent things can bring in good innovations, and I do think that that is one of them, where it's just like, it's just cool. It's just cool seeing the eyes move. There is some debate over whether the suit is exactly the same as the No Way Home one, or whether there's going to be two variations, because in the reveal video, it looks like the webbing is more raised. However, in the filming, it looks more kind of recessed. I think that they are the same suit, personally. I could be wrong, and they could be different suits, or it could just be a case of the suit not being quite finalized when they did the initial kind of tease video, whereas obviously a more refined version has appeared in filming. If they do use raised webbing though, I'm very happy about that. I do think that raised webbing looks the best on film. I think it just adds a level of dynamism to the Spider-Man suits. It's why I love the Raimi suit so much. It adds that level of like pop that I think really works on film, which you can't really obviously do in the comics in quite the same way. I just think that's cool. So the suit is an absolute 10 out of 10 from me. Tom Holland looked great in it, and it just looks like Spider-Man. It just looks like Spider-Man ripped directly out of the comics, and that alone is enough to get me excited for this movie. But that's not all we have, of course. We have a bunch of news as to the plot. So the first scene that we seem to be seeing being filmed is a police chase with Spider-Man involved and a tank which seems to have the logo of the Inner Demons. Now, the Inner Demons are the henchmen of Mr. Negative, who obviously most people will probably know these days from the Spider-Man video game. He's a guy who has like negative energy. So that looks like it could be one of the villains in this movie. Now, we don't know whether he's going to be in it as like a main antagonist or whether this is relatively early on in the film, like in a kind of montage scenario. I have heard rumours of a couple of other villains also being included, such as Tombstone. I believe Daniel RPK has said that Tombstone should be one of the ones rumoured to be in it. So it could be a case of we see him fight a bunch of smaller villains prior to the major conflict of the film. In terms of villains as well, we also believe Michael Mando is back as Scorpion. This was via The Hollywood Reporter initially. However, Michael Mando, who played the Scorpion, has seemingly now confirmed on his Instagram page that he is returning as Scorpion with the caption, "Sting Spider-Man" on Instagram. So I'm very glad to see that. It always bothered me at the end of Homecoming that we never found out, what happened to him after he met the Vulture in prison. So to finally get a follow-up on that after all these years is very welcome to me. Next up, we have some stuff that I'm less optimistic about, but I'll explain why in a second. So we've got two returning characters from the MCU, or from the wider Marvel Universe, seemingly confirmed for this movie. One of which is Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. The other is Jon Bernthal's Punisher. And this I am less optimistic for, purely because when the kind of speculation about this fourth Spider-Man movie was going on, there was a lot of talk about it being a more street-level film, which I was kind of hoping for a more solo Spider-Man outing, considering that the last few MCU films have had him teaming up with various different MCU characters, whether it be Iron Man in Homecoming, obviously, whether it be Nick Fury, or I guess the alien version of Nick Fury in Far From Home, or whether it be, obviously, Doctor Strange and the other Universal variants in No Way Home. So I was kind of hoping for more of a solo Spider-Man adventure. However, I'm more optimistic for this than I am the other idea that was speculated. Basically, if you don't know, there was a bunch of kind of speculation that Marvel Studios and Sony were kind of in a back and forth for what they wanted this movie to be, with Sony saying that they wanted another No Way Home, essentially, another multiversal crossover movie because of how successful No Way Home was, which from a business perspective makes sense, but from a storytelling perspective I wouldn't have been a fan of. And Marvel, who basically was saying that they wanted to do a more street-level, down-to-earth, personal Spider-Man movie. And it looks like Marvel won out, but I'm wondering if the compromise was, okay, you're getting a more street-level film, but we're going to put a few Marvel characters in there to bolster it. Which, if that was the case, I guess fair enough, but I don't really think that Spider-Man needs that. I think Spider-Man is more than big enough to carry a film on his own. I got it in the early days of the MCU because of, you could argue, the brand being relatively tainted, but these days I think it's more than, it's more than fine for Spider-Man to carry a film on his own. On Mark Ruffalo and Jon Bernthal, though, those both came from The Hollywood Reporter initially, and it is said that they are supposed to all fight each other, according to The Hollywood Reporter, and then basically come together in the third act kind of deal, which is interesting. Obviously that's unconfirmed, but we do know that a Universal truck was spotted on the set of Brand New Day, and if you don't know, Universal technically own the theatrical right to the Hulk. They kind of allow him to appear in the crossover movies, but if any solo Hulk movie is to be made, then it has to be done by Universal, hence why we've never had a solo Hulk movie since The Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton. So that explains why a Universal van would be at this Sony Spider-Man Marvel Studios shoot, is because the Hulk is obviously a universally owned property, so they need to have a presence there. So that would seemingly confirm Mark Ruffalo's Hulk as being a part of this film. So that is interesting. Obviously, in terms of director, it's been known for quite a while that the director is Destin Daniel Cretton, taking the role from John Watts, who was the previous director for the last 3 Home movies. Destin Daniel Cretton is largely known for Shang-Chi and a couple of other movies. Apparently he's known for a lot of kind of martial arts type action, so that's something I'm really interested to see him bring to Spider-Man. And I think Tom Holland also said in a recent interview that he was looking forward to doing more practical and down-to-earth stuff in this film, which is something, again, that I'm very in favour of. I much prefer practical effects over heavy CGI usage. CGI can look fantastic, and there is artistry to CGI, don't get me wrong, but I think there is value in those practical effects. I mean, it stands to reason that, one of the best superhero effects, in my opinion, to this day, is Alfred Molina's Doc Ock arms in Spider-Man 2. I think that they look fantastic, and I'd love to see more of that approach being implemented, and according to Tom Holland at least, that seems to be something that they are doing. I guess the final thing I will say is I am slightly worried with how much stuff this film already seems to be juggling. Obviously, multiple villains, multiple heroes, all that kind of stuff. And I do worry about it being just like another, overstuffed Marvel movie with too much going on. However, I think the fact that, they are saying a lot of the right things to get me excited at the moment, and I just hope that they can balance everything. Obviously, we also seemingly have the return of Zendaya and Jacob Batalon as the respective characters of Ned and MJ, and there was a bit of controversy about them coming back, because obviously at the end of No Way Home, their memories get wiped of Peter, and people are kind of worried that that'll just get immediately turned around in this movie. I don't think them coming back is necessarily evidence of that. I think you could argue that they could just end up at the same college or something, so they could be around while not necessarily knowing who Peter is still. So I'm relatively okay with that. They are an important part of this Spider-Man story specifically. Obviously, filming is currently undergoing in Glasgow, so there's probably going to be a bunch more stuff by the time I even get this video out. But those are just kind of my overall initial thoughts on what's going on with Spider-Man at the moment. I'm sure that I'll have more to say as more stuff comes out. It's very cool to see Tom Holland in the suit again. It's funny because he's going to be the first Spider-Man to get more than 3 films, which I think is kind of mad. At least in their respective trilogies. I guess you could argue that Tobey also carries that distinction with his appearance in No Way Home, but Tobey wasn't the lead of that film. So he's the first Spider-Man to lead 4 of his own films, which I think is, pretty cool. And it's cool to get to see a Peter Parker that gets to, grow up on screen, rather than, permanently looking like they're in their 30s. I think that's a cool thing about casting younger initially, is you get to actually watch them grow. And evolve into the character. But let me know what you guys think about Spider-Man Brand New Day, the new costume, and all the stuff that we know about so far. If you're hyped, let me know. Feel free to subscribe if you're new, like if you enjoy, and I'll see you later.